Welcome back to LB1 Mastermind. This has been a great night so far. This guest speaker I'm really excited about. Me and Dr. Yearby have had a lot of conversations, and now he's actually a colleague of mine, which I can't express how excited I am about this and what his future holds with Brown University. But this is a great night so far. All benefits are going back towards Coach Bill McGovern. This whole night's dedicated to him. This is a really interesting conversation. And for the coaches and players listening, this is really impactful. So I hope everyone takes a lot from this. Appreciate your time, Dr. Yearby, and thanks for joining us.
I greatly appreciate it. Stoked to be involved. Appreciate the offer. We can go with Coach Yearby for here on out. Definitely appreciate the recognition of the Dr. Yearby there, but looking forward to tonight's conversation and, of course, working alongside you here at Brown.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's get right into it. So obviously our first couple talks were really impactful to me as a curious coach, learning about drill work. We're going to start there and just kind of your background with how you got into this and just explain to the audience, to the players. There's a lot of players on here, linebackers across the country, and there's a lot of great coaches, right? A lot of great people that have been on here. Kind of explain your background, how you got into this, why you think it's important.
Try to make it brief here. Let's see. I started about 20 years ago as a coach. I was a running backs coach actually in college. And so I decided that I probably wanted to shift into spending some more time with the family, coaching, doing some personal training on the side. So did that very briefly and then just, was away from football too long and had to get right back into it. So jumped right back in and was a strength coach at the University of Minnesota with the Golden Gopher football team. And it was around that time that I realized I was missing a lot when it came to understanding how to help athletes adapt their skills when it matters on the game field. I was trying to get them to repeat techniques in isolation. Of course, I was helping them get stronger and faster, and that's important. And that was my job, of course, but I felt like there was more to it. And I was watching the interactions that were unfolding, how linebackers were working through traffic, working off of blocks, being able to make tackles in open space. And I was like, man, there is more to this. I'm missing a lot. That led to me becoming interested in human behavior and in particular skill acquisition or skill adaptation. So that led to me getting my doctorate in sport and exercise. And then I've been producing a lot of peer-reviewed journal articles. And we have a book coming out to help coaches learn more about how to set up learning environments that can help athletes transfer their skills to game day. And you mentioned the D word there, drills. I don't even use that word because that implies there's one way of being and doing. And I don't believe that there is. I think that there's the need for athletes to utilize their capabilities and meet the needs of the problems that are emerging in front of them. So you typically use learning environment or activities. And so that's a short background on myself. I'm happy to unpack even more so, but I figured that's probably plenty to give the listeners something to chew on.
Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, it's the scientific method and the understanding with research, kind of the human behaviors, right? And you talked about, as a coach, you're like, wait, you just said no, you don't like the word drill. That's all we use, right? Like, what the heck? And we might lose some guys already, probably right now. But I'd ask the coaches and the players to just think differently, think a little more curiously right now, and listen to the way he's going to adapt these drills and these learning environments, and he's going to kind of unpack some of the drills and ways to make drills better, right? Not everything we're doing, right, is wrong, right? But there's some things that after talking multiple conversations, maybe our 20th, that I've learned a lot from. So let's start with drills. And sorry, that's a bad word.
Oh, that's all right.
Let's start with what we know as drills, and let's talk to the listeners about ways to make them better.
Yeah, great question, great point. The biggest thing to note here, and you mentioned it, like coaches are doing a lot of things right already. I mean, let's face it, we're helping athletes excel, win games, win championships and the like. And I'm obviously taking a cheap shot there at drills. But the whole idea of it is that we are setting up an opportunity for our athletes to not repeat a technique in isolation, but repeat the process of solving a movement problem. Because let's face it, football is dynamic. It's constantly changing. It's unpredictable. It's alive. And so if we want to help our athletes become better football players, well, we have to set up alive movement problems and give them the keys to the car in some ways. Maybe think of ourselves more as a guide versus a dictator. And I know that's tough for some coaches. It was tough for me to begin with to realize, like, you know what? I don't have every single answer. That doesn't mean that whatever the play call may be or whatever front that is that we're in or whatever, blitzes that we're executing doesn't mean those are important. It just means that how they actually unfold in a dynamic alive environment is going to be up to how the athlete solves those problems. And those problems change, as coaches know, as we know, as players know. So for me, the biggest thing is I look at the unfolding interactions in the game. So think about it as like a slice of the sport. And for linebackers, that could be in the box, you're navigating through traffic, your vision's occluded for a short period of time, you're trying to pick up the running back or the quarterback. Maybe you are working off the edge and you're having to work around an offensive tackle, a tight end, whatever it may be. Think about those as slices of the sport, or potentially out in open space where you're having to make a tackle, and if you don't, that thing's to the house, right? So think about those as slices of the game. So for me, what I'm looking at is how can I set up a similar unfolding problem? I can't set up the exact same problem because it's going to change based on the weather conditions, the down and distance, the score of the game. You get where I'm going. So I'm trying to set up that problem or that learning environment and then allow the athlete to rep that. So our everyday drills, they're important, but it's how they're set up that may change. So I'm not trying to repeat the same thing over and over. And if I haven't lost you already, I'm probably going to with this here, or I may spark your curiosity just a little bit. There's no such thing as muscle memory. So I know all of a sudden now you're like, oh man, you got to be kidding me. It's not even a helpful analogy because it doesn't explain skill learning. We're not a computer. Our brains are not computers. We are more like a radio station that's tuning in to the information that's available on the field. And that might be the velocity that another individual is moving at, the angle of pursuit they're taking. That might be how our foot's coming in contact with the ground, where we're needing to drop in our zone coverage. You kind of get where I'm going with this. So my point is, we want athletes to be attentive. We want them to connect to relevant information, such as the behavior of another individual. So in closing, my point is I want to help set up alive movement problems that contain football information, which means there should be an opposition present, that are changing slightly from repetition to repetition. And then coaches can still coach, but I want you to take in mind and keep understanding of coaches are coaching by setting up those drills or setting up those learning activities, and that our communication, our guidance is just helping facilitate that process of solving those problems.
There's a lot to unpack in that, and I love it, and I'm excited to unpack it a little bit and just kind of dive deeper into some of the things I think that hit with me, at least, and I'm sure with other coaches and players. The muscle memory thing was a mic drop. So just going back on muscle memory, as a coach for years and years and years, I felt really good doing EDDs and doing the same drill every single day because I felt like the player, it's like brushing your teeth a little bit, right? Like every morning you do the same thing, right? So it made me feel good that I was going over, a pattern of movements that maybe correlated to the game, but when you actually think about it, maybe didn't, right? There's no cones on the field. There's no bags on the field. Them memorizing a pattern of footwork and them sweating doesn't mean they're getting any better. And that was hard for me to understand.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? So it made me feel good, though, that I did that footwork drill. And the kids started to think it made them better because they were getting better at memorizing the pattern of the bags and they were sweating. So in theory, I was looking at it like, wow, this is a great drill. And that was all until I met you. So talk to me a little bit about linebackers, bag drills, cone running or running to a cone. Talk to me about ways, not that that's maybe a terrible thing to do, but maybe ways to make those things better, and just talk that first, and then just a little bit more about muscle memory in the scientific way.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the big thing you mentioned there, which sticks out to me, and obviously we've had some conversations about this, but it's the fact that those cones, those bags, those aren't available for pickup on game day. So players aren't picking up that information. It's not there. So if that information's not there, and that's the information I'm coupling my behavior to be successful in the cone drill, the bag drill, that's fantastic for the cone drills and the bag drills. But that's not what's available for pickup on game day. I might have to shuffle, I might have to cross over, I might have to come downhill hard, but I'm doing so in relation to what's occurring on the other side from the other players. So coaches may be hearing this and going, well, I can't go full team on a regular basis. That goes back to that slices of the sport that I mentioned. It can be a 2v2 interaction. It can be 3 or 4 moving bodies that are passively moving, maybe not even actively really trying to aggressively block me or be involved in the activity, but they're passively moving in front of myself and maybe a running back. And I'm having to then navigate through or around those passively moving bodies in order to converge on the running back to make the tackle. That information is what's relevant. Now, it's even more specific when those individuals may be trying to reach me on a block, or they're actually trying to get in my way to where I can't make the tackle. So those slices of the sport are important because I'm not repeating something to where I'm making it automatic. Where the term muscle memory came from was what's called the automaticity principle. Automaticity principle is something where I am trying to repeat something and to make it automatic in the brain, and it's stored somewhere as a motor program. And then whenever I see something happening, then I go, timeout. I go to my brain. I try to go through the Rolodex there. There's that motor program. Out comes that motor program, and then out comes action. Well, think about a sport of football. There's no timeouts in football when it comes to the ball's been snapped and I have to make the tackle. I have to directly couple myself to what's referred to as relevant or specifying information. So this is at the scientific, more theoretical level, and this has been confirmed by empirical research, that I then am coupling myself to the velocity of another individual, the changing interpersonal distance, other individuals on the field. That's what I'm using, what I'm picking up to then move in skillful ways. So if I have all that information removed and I'm just running through cones, I'm running over bags, I'm going to get really good at that, by the way, because that's a completely different activity, completely different drill. Now, some coaches will argue, oh, that carries over. I've seen guys do that, and they'll try to take a clip of it. I'd like to believe that those individuals they're just adapting because they're good athletes. They're not becoming good because of that. It's in spite of. So the biggest thing is we want to set up the opportunity for them to become sensitive to, attuned to information that will actually emerge during game day. And that information is other bodies, teammates that are around. Think about like even zone, right? Like I'm moving where I'm moving to a space, but I'm also doing it in relation to where my teammates are moving because we're trying to shut down an offensive attack. So I need to be sensitive to where they are in the field. So for me, that muscle memory, it falls apart because number one, it's a slang term that is used for the automaticity principle. And that representation or that motor program, other scientists don't even know where that is. They don't even know if it exists in the brain anywhere. That's a completely different theory of learning. What I'm mentioning is the brain is important, but it's a holistic movement problem solving, meaning what my perceptions are from my visual pickup, what I'm hearing from an auditory perspective, what my other teammates are doing. And then I'm coupling my movement to that information. So once again, it goes back to the slices of the sport, and coaches have great value here and can be mightily impactful by allowing the athletes to work through that process of solving some of these problems and not telling them that technique was wrong whenever that technique might not have fit their frame. It might not have fit their explosiveness. They might have actually spilled over on the outside edge because they picked up the center of mass of that running back shifting and they knew that he was going to bounce it to the outside. So why would I fall into said gap automatically if I pick up that running back's going to bounce? Now, obviously we can go into major conversations there, but I'll stop.
No, yeah. Again, a lot to unpack. This is awesome, by the way. This is great. I know coaches they're learning and they're trying, and the players are trying. So this is good. So stay with us. This is something that you talked about, which I talked about a lot with our players, is phase, right? Like, and you just mentioned it with block destruction and with other things that we're talking about, was how far away are you from the ball? And like you said, like, yes, we're asking you to be outside on this block, but maybe the ball carrier is very far inside. So it's almost like coaches hate when they're robots, right? So we don't want robots on the field. Any player that played football, you played, I played, all these guys, that's on the call played. It's about the players on the turf, right? And we need to make sure that we're doing things. So what I took from the first couple of times meeting with you, just in a simple approach, was let's make my drills alive. What does that mean, right? So 1 versus 0 drills. Talk to me about 1 versus 0 drills and the concept about 1 versus nothing, 1 versus nobody, no stimulus. Talk to me about that process, and does that and your importance on that. So the 1 versus 0, some of that stuck out. The other thing I want you to talk about is repetition without repetition. Those two talking points really stuck out to me.
Yeah, those are two of my favorites. So I'm happy to hear they stuck out for you. Let's see. The 1v0 is a tough one for me. I personally would do away with individual periods as we know them, because in those individual periods, and I know some coaches are like, that's it, I don't want to hear any more from this.
They're walking out.
Hang on for a second. Hang on. Even if you don't absorb everything, maybe there's something here. I'm a big Bruce Lee fan, so you can discard what you don't feel as though is viable, but I bet you there's something in here. For me, the individual periods need to be done away with because we are executing a technique in isolation where there isn't game information. There isn't game-like information to pick up all those distances you talked about, the alignment of the offense, what are the spacing in between the guard and the tackle, so on and so forth. That's all important information, as is the down and distance. That's going to guide my intentions. In those 1v0s, it's just repeating footwork. But I always ask, what is the footwork in relation to, or what does it need to be in relation to? The other team or my teammates potentially even. So if they aren't available there, I'm just going through mindless or rote repetition, which actually leads nicely into repetition without repetition. That was originally coined by Nikolai Bernstein, one of the greatest thinkers and movement scientists of our time. And it was repeating the process of solving the problem that changes from rep to rep. So you're not trying to rep it after rep over and over and over, but you're repping it because the rep's changing and you're repping the process of solving that problem. That's what I mentioned in the very onset of our call. So the aliveness piece there, what does that really mean? And I want to make it abundantly clear. It's ever changing and it's unpredictable. If you look at the problem that you've set up, or drill, call it drill. If you look at the drill you set up and it's not ever changing and it's not unpredictable, I honestly would get rid of it. Now, I've had coaches go, what happens if you get on a staff? This is before I came to Brown. What happens if you get on a staff and they just fight you? Okay, fine. Nary one of those drills, I won't touch it. I'll leave it alone as a skill acquisition specialist. I'll let you do that one drill. But my job is to help us win football games. My job is to help us and work with the coaches that are the true experts when it comes to the X's and O's. Help the coaches design alive movement problems. I wouldn't be doing my job, and it'd be negligent to the players if I let them go through mindless repetitions with no game-like information. So marry that one EDD. The rest of them, if it's not alive, meaning it's not unpredictable, it's not ever changing, I get rid of it. Now, the next thing I'd mention here, how do I make it alive? Well, one easy way is just adding a passive body that's there. I'll give you a specific example, and this is something I've actually seen at a couple universities, one of which being where we are currently, which I really like. If you've got an offensive and a defensive lineman, and they're working through dynamic touch or basically leverage points and how I can move that individual, maybe the D end or defensive tackle's trying to work around that offensive lineman while the lineman's trying to stay engaged with him. They can be doing that in a passive way, still becoming sensitive to that information. And you've got a ball carrier and you've got a linebacker, and they are moving maybe to the right side. So maybe the linebacker's moving to the right side, running back's moving to the left. And it's yeah, exactly. And it's a 5x5, 7x7, 10x10. You can choose it. Space, pretty clear objectives. That running back's trying to be elusive, make it to the line to gain. Linebacker's trying to either thud tempo them, firm two-hand tag, or if it's in full tackle, they're all important. They're trying to converge on that ball carrier, but they're doing it in relation to the moving bodies in front of them. That's now alive because now it's ever changing, because it's not going to be the same footwork from the offensive lineman, same pass, bull rush, spin, whatever it may be from the defensive lineman. And in the running back, they may hit a jump cut. They may hit a shimmy. They may be deceptive with their tempo in some way, shape, or form. And they're elusive left or right, and all of a sudden they cut back in. They're cutting back in based on affordances or opportunities for action that emerge, but they're unpredictable. So that's alive. Now, that's just one example. I'll give you one more here. If I am wanting to work with an athlete or with a linebacker and they're struggling maybe through the middle of the field, whatever it may be, you've identified they're struggling in traffic, they're struggling to break up the ball on some type of an in route, on a drag route, whatever it may be. Well, you can have some passive moving bodies in front of a quarterback that's dropping back. You can have passive resistance off of an edge, or maybe there's no resistance. Now, why is that important to the quarterback? That way their behaviors aren't like ungame-like, basically. They're just dropping back and just nobody's pressuring them. They might have to climb the ladder. They might have to spin out of the pocket, but basically they're trying to throw to some type of an in route. The linebacker is having to drop, see through that traffic, Is there a ball coming? Did he spin? Where am I trying to pick him up? You kind of get where I'm going with this. You could even add a running back to it, and the linebacker has to pick up. Did he hand it off, or is he dropping back some type of an inward? Yeah, is there a mesh there? So I'll let coaches coach, right? Let the running back coaches, linebacker coaches, you coach. My job would be to step in and go, hey, coach, it looks like they're repeating the same technique over and over. Let's make it a little bit more unpredictable by adding that running back where there's a mesh point there, and they have to pick up whether it was actually handed off or he's going to be running an in route or potentially some type of a out route. So that would make it more alive. So I just offered those two examples simply because I felt as though, for some coaches, they're like, man, I can't just do away with my repetitive drills. Well, you can just tweak them a little bit, and it's now more alive and more game-like for the players.
Yeah, and that hit with me. I'm like your CLA protege. So this is like, that's what I'm calling myself, an apprentice. But the waking up senses, you mentioned that to me once. And that, again, waking up your senses, your visuals, your ears, whatever senses you have. Something I struggle with. And for years, I go to camps, I go to clinics, I go to all these places. They're running through the bags. And constantly I hear coaches say this, get your eyes up, get your eyes up. Because what are they doing? They're staring at the ground. And they're like, get your eyes up. And they're staring at the memorization patterns of the bags. And all the drills that you presented to me, their senses are alive. They're looking at something like a game, right? So like it just makes sense to me that what you do on Saturday can't be different than what you do in practice, right? Because you're changing something just for the feeling of you feeling good as a coach. And to me, it requires curiosity. It requires vulnerability. And for the coaches listening, to kind of unpack the drills you're doing and say, is this really helping? Right? Is this really helping my athlete? Because we're all obsessed with player development. Every coach, we all got into football, right, not because of NIL and not because of what's going on in the actual landscape. We actually, hopefully, all got into football because we're obsessed with player development, was making a player that you recruited into an All-American. And if you're not interested in this, part of the not no issues. But if you are, I think there's a huge benefit. And honestly, this is going to be an ever growing thing in our industry. And I think this is something that might be one of the first couple, ways to explain this. Talk to me about, and I'll let you go because everyone's busy. Talk to me about where this is going, the CLA, the ecological dynamics. Talk about what sports you're involved in. Talk about skill acquisition specialists. I know you're one of the first in the country in Division I football. Talk to me about where you think this is going. Give some bold predictions and just kind of talk to the group.
Yeah, good questions, good points there. A couple things. You mentioned CLA, which is the constraint led approach. So for those who are like, what does that mean? Every coach is using constraints. They're manipulating constraints. They just may not know that they are. Some are doing it actually rather well, and they've never even heard of the idea before. And then they learn more about it, and then they get even better because now they have a framework. So the constraints-led approach, and I don't have time to go into the deep science, but actually originated from like children and babies in development, the constraint model back in the 80s, Carl Newell. But the constraints-led approach allows for coaches to purposely manipulate constraints, which are in 3 categories. And there's papers and books out there, some of which we put together. I encourage you to just type in constraints-led approach. You could even go through type in constraints-led approach and my last name, and there's a paper that pops up in American football explaining what these ideas are. But constraints are in 3 categories: the individual, so think height, weight, body fat ratio, genetics, emotions, like those are all constraints. Task constraints, so in the sport of football, down and distance, the space available, time remaining on the game clock, the turf itself. There's a number of other task constraints, the opponents, teammates that are there. And then also environmental constraints. And so those can be physical or socio-cultural. Physical being like altitude. You playing in Colorado, you playing in Rhode Island. That's going to change things, of course. And then sociocultural meaning like the overall, like, is it Texas? Is it Florida? Or is it the Northeast? Like those are very different games themselves. California, right? Well, notice that whenever I mention those, you probably realize those are all interconnected. They don't operate in isolation. One is influenced directly by the other. So the CLA is a purposeful manipulation of constraints. Most coaches are manipulating task constraints, which is great. They're changing the size of the workspace, which I've seen you do beautifully before. You're opening it up, you're closing it down. Hey, coach, why'd you do this? Well, it's too easy for me. And I realized I needed to open it up to make it to where there's more room for a two-way go. So you can do that. You can give some down and distance. You could even have them change surfaces because they may play on grass sometimes, turf other times. That's going to change your footability and how you can actually look to cut back or converge on a ball carrier. So constraint-led approach is underpinned by ecological dynamics. You can look that up. We explain it in the papers. I won't go into depth on it right now, but it explains human behavior basically and skill learning. So bold predictions are being the fact that American football is, let's just be honest, it's the best sport. It's awesome, but it's been the last to adopt skill acquisition specialists. Skill acquisition specialists are operating in the NBA right now, currently. They're operating in Major League Baseball, the NHL, the Premier League. Most of these ideas are already overseas and have been used for a long time. My doctoral supervisor was actually one of the individuals involved with coming up with the ecological dynamics framework, which is from numerous scientific domains. These ideas have been used in rugby and badminton and different sports for years and years. Football has been one of the last sports to adopt the ideas, but you mark my words, within the next few years, there will be skill acquisition specialists across a number of different programs. I wouldn't be surprised within the next 5 years if it's across all organizations. It'll probably start cascading from the NFL down. I have numerous friends who are in very prominent positions who are actually very curious to see what happens with Brown football, simply because, to my knowledge, I'm the first adopting an ecological dynamics framework and doing so at the collegiate level. So cheers to Coach Perry and yourself and others for being curious. I'd also like to say I don't have all the answers. One of the beautiful things about the constraint-led approach and an ecological dynamics way of coaching, there are times where I'll look at the athlete and go, how would you increase or decrease the complexity here? Like I might see them struggling and go, hey, how would you decrease the complexity of this? Man, coach, the space is way too big. I probably need to have like a little bit less space because I can't reach him. All right, cool. Let's actually squeeze the space a little bit. I need to meet that athlete where they are. If they're constantly swimming, they're not going to get better. They're not going to adapt. And they're also going to become demotivated, right? Now, there are times where they need to struggle because they may struggle against some of the big teams that you play. But that representative co-design piece is critical. And then my role isn't to step in and go, hey, coach, you're wrong. Don't do it that way. It's to go, hey, out of curiosity, coach, what's the intention of this drill here, this activity here? Or I'm looking to do X, Y, Z. Or out of curiosity, could you add another body back here, which would allow that linebacker to couple themselves to the behavior of that individual, which would be more game-like? Well, yeah, I can still accomplish the activity drill by doing it that way. All right, cool. Let's try that. Well, I know already I made it more alive. And then there are times, and this is tough for me. Obviously, I'm trying to rattle off a lot here, but you can tell I like to talk. There are times where I have to be quiet. And you'll notice, you haven't even seen this as much yet. When I coach, I actually don't say a ton. I'll actually help set up an activity. I'll sit back and let them work through the process of solving a few reps. And then I may walk over and go, hey, remember 360. Now, what might that mean? Now, I've already talked to the linebacker about 360 means eyes open, ears open, making sure you're picking up the world around you. All that does is educate their attention to that information. And then the last point, and I was chuckling when you said this. You said like they're going through cone drills and bag drills and their eyes are down. Well, of course they are. They don't want to hit the bag and you just shoot them out for hitting the bag. Right. That's actually where the information is that's valuable. Yeah. It's easy to help them pick their eyes up by putting another body over there. Because
it's so easy when you just put another guy there. It's like why people don't think of that is it was
coaches do a great job of this. You've heard Bill Belichick talk about this. We have this quote in our paper. He says there's a very different thing between, I think he says track speed, but like track speed and football speed. Football speed is in relation to an opponent. And you do so and you're changing that tempo or your cuts and the like. Or Jerry Rice, they talk about Jerry Rice wasn't overly fast, but he ran a 4.2 on game day. That's because he knew how to release. He knew how to get your center of mass or your body orientation shifted in a certain way where he could cut back against you. And the same could be said for tons of other excellent movers.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is I could keep going for hours with you. I mean, this is fantastic. I think, for coaches, players, I really appreciate Dr. Tyler Yearby hopping on this call, skill acquisition specialist here at Brown. Super excited to work with him and see the results that we produce together with Coach Perry and the whole squad here. But hopefully you took something from this that's impactful, whether it's a nugget, whether it's, a lot of stuff. If you have more questions, I'm sure Coach will be more than happy to get reached out on social media. How do people reach you? How can people stay in contact?
Yeah, I'm reachable on all social media platforms, primarily on X and Instagram. LinkedIn, whatever it may be, just my name, Tyler Yearby. And then, cheap plug, but I do own an education company, and this is what we've done for years, although I won't be doing that now. It's taking a step back and letting my business partners run it. We consult with a lot of professional organizations and colleges, but I've been very grateful for the opportunity. Coach Perry extended me, and then working, like I said, alongside yourself and the other incredible staff here at Brown. So you can go to my email account there at Brown on our website. And then, the biggest thing is, and you said this earlier in the call, like we all want what's best for the players. We're all after player development, and it's also beyond, and I know it's all, I guess to a certain extent, is about winning games, but it's also helping athletes fall in love with movement. Not everybody's going to get drafted in the first round. So I think you'll be surprised in some ways whenever you start making activities more alive. Athletes love it, actually quite like it, and they want
Ownership,
to love it.
right? It gives them ownership. You said something about co-adaptive learning, but
Co-adaptive.
as coaches, we want to give ownership, because ownership to them empowers them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It empowers them to feel like we're doing things together. Whenever you're doing
Right.
things together, right, they take more attention to it. They take more ownership. And that's the whole point of this whole thing, guys. For the players, for the coaches, really appreciate Coach Yearby. I know
Thank you.
we're all busy and we're moving on, but this is one of my favorite conversations so far, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Coach. Greatly appreciate it, and appreciate it to the listeners as well.
All right, man. Thanks. See ya.